Hi, and welcome to the NLHA channel, where this week we will be discussing the Protection of Personal Information Act. Okay, so a business owner heard that the Protection of Personal Information Act, more commonly known as POPIA or the POPIA Act, came into operation on the 1st of July 2020, and that companies or businesses have basically 1 year to become POPIA compliant. Yet at the same time, she doesn't know what the compliance entails in terms of POPIA. So this week we will be briefly looking at what small businesses or small business owners need to do to become POPIA compliant, or ensure that their business processes are POPIA compliant. So before we go into or we get into some of the nitty-gritty details, I can do a full day session or workshop on POPIA, and it will still not be enough to cover everything that is required. POPIA is a very comprehensive piece of legislation, and it impacts on a huge array of business processes, business functions, and systems. So it might impact on things like accounting processes, employee information, client information, vendor information, even things that you don't think of. For example, it might impact things like if you have surveillance security, camera security, it might impact on that. Biometric scanning for time and attendance. So if there's biometric scans for time and attendance, it might be impacted by the requirements of POPIA. So it's important to note that POPIA will affect all businesses, no matter how big or how small, whether you own a tuck shop or whether you are the CEO of an international conglomerate. It will affect you. But more importantly, it will also affect the individuals. So as a society, as a people, we also need to be aware and know what is expected of POPIA. From a business perspective, with roughly 12 months, or actually, it's actually more plus minus 9 months, you need to be compliant by 30 June 2021. So that's roughly 9 months. And this will have a tremendous impact on your business. So with that time frame, if you haven't started already, you are actually a little bit behind, but it's not a lost cause yet. There are still hope if you start taking immediate action. Okay, it should be noted that not all sections of the POPIA is in effect. However, the biggest majority of sections are in effect or came into effect from 1 July. For this session, I'm not going to go through a list of all the sections that came into effect. However, you are welcome to reach out to us, and we'll be glad to assist and clarify any questions that you might have with regards to being POPIA compliant. The implementation of POPIA in companies, it will differ from company to company. There's no blueprint as to how to implement POPIA that you can just use. It will differ from company to company, even if you are in the same sectors. So a law firm A will not necessarily implement POPIA the same as law firm B, or retailer 1 will not implement it in the same way as retailer 2. it differs, and that's very important. So with that, there's no blueprint, but a draft implementation framework that one can use for a small business would obviously start by saying, start by gaining knowledge, then you plan and identify the areas, basically doing a gap analysis. And then you need to go over and start your developmental phase or stage, and you develop what needs to be developed in terms of the compliance. And then whatever you develop, the next phase would be to actually act or implement what you have developed. And then finally, POPIA is not a piece of paper, or it's not something that you're going to write down and going to have it lie down somewhere in a file 13 or in somebody's cupboard. There needs to be continuous review and monitoring of what has been implemented from a POPIA perspective. So that would be a basic draft implementation framework for a small company. Now, if we go into a little bit more detail, so for me, one of the most important factors in the move towards POPIA compliance is for the business owner to go and read the entire act. I will put a link in the description of this video where it's easy to go through it electronically, but go read the entire act. Remember, you can delegate responsibility. You can delegate the implementation. However, you cannot delegate accountability. So business owners, you need to make sure you know exactly what is required from the act. You don't have to be a specialist in any field, because POPIA basically covers governance, and as a business owner, you are supposed to be aware and know the requirements of governance. So you need to understand that. I would say read, and read. Make sure you read the entire act. There's a lot of companies now that came out of the woodwork since, I think, 2014, 2015, that promoted assistance with POPIA compliance, and there's a lot of good companies out there doing it. NLHA is one of those companies that actually assist our clients with POPIA compliance. However, companies charge a fortune to assist you in becoming POPIA compliant. And the only reason why is because you did not read the POPIA. You do not know what's required of your company. And hence the reason that they get away with charging you thousands to become POPIA compliant. If you know the act, if you know what's written in the act, if you know what is required, then obviously that would minimize your cost of becoming POPIA compliant when using an external vendor or service provider like NLHA. So again, POPIA relates to governance, and therefore it is a top structure function and requires top structure involvement. Second thing the second factor that I've come across that's very common is the following. POPIA is not an ICT issue. POPIA is not an internal audit function. POPIA is not a HR department function or responsibility. POPIA is not a legal department issue. As a matter of fact, POPIA requires an organizational or business-wide assessment of all processes and systems within your company. With that said, the one thing that we found is that POPIA refers to an information officer. Now, the information officer, and this is more for the bigger companies, The information officer role should not be confused with the CIO role. So the CIO is the Chief Information Officer, but that is an ICT function or an ICT role. Whereas the information officer, in terms of POPIA, basically takes responsibility for ensuring compliance with the POPIA. In my view, someone with authority in the company should take the responsibility of being the information officer. And although it's not prescribed, my view is that the business owner, the accounting officer, the managing director, the person with the highest authority in the company, that is the person that needs to be appointed or take the responsibility or role of being information officer. Once that person takes on that role, there is nothing that prohibits that person from appointing deputy information officers that will take responsibility for implementing the provisions of POPIA or making sure that the company is compliant. However, my view is that the most senior person in the company must take on the role of being the information officer. Like I said, it's not prescribed. However, it will give credence to POPIA within the company for the processes that follows. Okay, so once you have appointed the information officer or assigned the role of information officer, companies tend to jump into changing and reviewing and amending policies and processes and procedures. I say before you get to that point, first draft an overarching privacy policy. What's important about the privacy policy is that you need to take note. Don't copy a privacy policy from somewhere else, even from another company or entity that is in the same vertical or sector that you are. Like I mentioned, it will differ from company to company. So don't just do a blanket copy and paste. It will come back and bite you. So draft a privacy policy, because the privacy policy will then inform the other policies and other processes and other procedures. So it's more important to first draft your privacy policy and make sure that your privacy policy aligns and accords with the requirements of the POPIA. Then before you get to the policies, processes and procedures, you need to start with basic awareness amongst all employees in the company or the business. And again, using a top-down approach. So if the information officer is the most authoritative person in the company, then it becomes an easier task to give effect to the change management requirement or approach that the company needs to be successful when it comes to the implementation of POPIA. Now, once you've done that and you've got your employees on board, then allow them to assist and give input into the implementation of POPIA in the company. Allow them to assist with the identification of what personal information is used within the company. Let them assist with the review of their systems within their specific line functions, the processes within their functions, and how these systems and processes interact with the personal information that you identified, and in doing that, basically ensuring compliance with POPIA. So once you've done that, once you've done your gap analysis, once you've done your identification of the personal information that is processed within the company, within the procedures, the systems, once you've done your gap analysis, now you can start and say, okay, let's look at our existing contracts, let's look at our existing policies, our existing operating procedures, and so forth, and we start amending that to align with the gap analysis, the outcome of your gap analysis, and also the privacy policy that is aligned with POPIA. So for me, a general rule of thumb at this stage, so if you haven't done anything yet, a general rule of thumb would be: do not collect any person's personal information. Do not share anyone's personal information without their consent. It won't always work like that, but for me that's a good general rule of thumb if you are not yet at a level where you are fully or nearing full POPIA compliance. Again, I can't stress it enough. Know what is required from the POPIA Act. Attend workshops, attend seminars, get people in to open up the Act and explain it to your top management, your line management, the rest of the company. Make sure that you gather as much information about POPIA as you can. The more you read, the more you discuss it, the easier it will be to understand it. And once you understand it, the easier it will become to implement it. Remember what I said? The responsibility can be delegated. However, the accountability will remain with the company and the highest authority in the company. So make sure that you do your utmost to understand what is required. A final note: non-compliance with POPI or with the POPI Act will and can lead to very hefty fines and even imprisonment of the business owners or the accounting officers. So from a POPIA compliance perspective, you need to be able to show that you have done your due diligence. So if you haven't started, now is the time to start. Get the right people in. Make sure that you know exactly what is required, and the sooner you get going, the better it's going to be for you. If you want to be featured as a guest on this channel, please reach out to us and we can collaborate and discuss topics that might be of interest to you. If you have any legal question, please submit them. All our details are in the description below, and who knows, maybe we will select one of your questions in an upcoming discussion. So with that said, thank you for watching the NLHA channel, and also thank you for hitting that subscribe and like button, and most of all, thank you for sharing this on your social networks. Goodbye.